This man is making a squid. The squid is a large, single, barbless hook whose shaft is embedded in feathers and wrapped with calfskin or dolphin skin. When it's thrown in the water, its actions resemble those of the squid, a cuttlefish the tuna like most of all. It's attached to the line with a fine steel wire leader. Tuna bird. This means we're nearing a school. Tuna, the sign we've all been waiting for. The clipper moves through the porpoises into the school. Every man on board goes into action. This knee pad is as important to a fisherman as it is to a football player. Heavy boots protect their feet. They're slit this way at the top so they can be put on or kicked off quickly. And this strong leather pad is used not only for protection, but as a socket for the pole. And with the precision of a highly trained team, the men move in preparation for the catch. The chummer goes to work throwing out the live bait. The tuna, in their frenzy for food, strike at anything, including the unbaited hooks. On they come, and with each flash of a pole, 20, 30, 50 pounds of tuna are tossed on deck. Every color of the rainbow is brilliantly reflected in this seething mass of tuna. We're lucky, for here's one of nature's strangest phenomena, reserved only for fishermen. These are spinning porpoises, and they jump as high as 15 feet in the air. Uh-oh, that flashing white belly, that's no tuna. That's a shark. Our rights to the fish are being disputed by those savages of the ocean, the shark, the barracuda. He hit him, a fatal shot right in the spinal column. The shark is as determined as he is deadly. Has been known to jump clear out of the water to grab a fish that's been hooked. Sharks have even jumped onto the racks with the fishermen. He searches about underwater, ready to make a ferocious pass, slicing with a razor-like accuracy. The barracuda is just as deadly. One of the fastest swimmers in the sea. He, too, is waiting to move in on the unwary tuna. Another shark is hooked. As he's brought on board, it can be seen plainly why he frightens the tuna. His teeth are like razors. Then, as though bearing out the fears of the fishermen, the tuna vanish as suddenly as they appeared. They seek the refuge of the deep to escape the killers. The work is not over. The fish are quickly consigned to the quick-freeze brine below decks. And we have aboard more than 60 tons of the tastiest meat that ever came from the depths of the ocean.
Good cutting enhances the quality of good meat. In his way, the meat cutter is an artist. Poor cutting results in an inferior piece of meat, regardless of quality.
What up, meatheads? This is Travis, American Butcher, and this is the Meat Block Podcast. And if you couldn't tell by that amazing 1950s educational video, this episode is about fishing. Or fish. Not fish in the way of the ska band from the 90s, whose drummer was in a cult and ended up getting deprogrammed. It's pretty interesting and funny. But this is about fish, as in the sense of the forgotten protein of butchers. Brian Mayer, Neil, Patrick Demps, Shannon, and a few other butchers, including Ryan, David, and myself, are a part of a think tank. I like to call it, where we talk and spitball ideas off each other. And a conversation we were having the other day is Master Butcher. Now, I know there are certain criterias that define what a Master Butcher is. That's not what this episode is about. That is also the topic that I never want to do an episode about because of how subjective and how it changes region from region and what defines a master in their crafts. But one thing that Brian did bring up is that most people don't include fish in the protein that is in their repertoire. Even though when you go into every chain grocery store, you see meat and seafood together, sharing usually the same amount of case space, butted right next to each other. Me being privileged and not working too much in retail, and I mean that I don't look down on retail. I mean that in the sense that I hate the general public. But because of this and my lack of interacting with the general public, I don't know how to cut fish as well as many other butchers or fishmongers out there. I know how to cut salmon steaks, I know how to fillet a fish, and I certainly know how to clean a fish. I'm not at all confident in my ability to tell you where the belly starts. I'm not at all confident in my ability to do boneless fillets. I am that person that would need a light table to see if there's still bones in my side. I live in northern Washington, and I recently went to Seattle. I go there not often, but usually like once a month or once every 2 months. And my family, we went to the aquarium right there next to Pike's Place. And I stopped by Pike's Place Market, saw the creepy fishmongers. I don't know how you pronounce that word. It's a word that I've never had to say on a regular basis. And there's a crowd of like 100 plus people around the fish market down at Pike's Place. And there was salmon, there was monkfish, there were rockfish, and then a slew of fish that I couldn't even begin to tell you what the name was. And my ignorance of this part of the industry mixed with what Brian thinks a master butcher should have, I realized doing an episode about it would force me to educate myself on the topic. Not be an expert, but just let me be slightly more informed. And that's what I really enjoy about this podcast, is answering questions that I don't even know the answer to. This first segment, I'm going to kick it to Ryan, who has worked on fishing vessels in the North Atlantic.
I was the assistant team leader for a grocery seafood department for approximately 2 months. During that time, our department had a summer truck sale. We bought a truckload of whole salmon for a 1-day open-air parking lot event. This department would do this every summer. We advertised the fish for a good price and took pre-orders. Then on the day of, we'd sell the whole weight of the fish and fillet them for customers there on the spot. In this way, we sold a lot of salmon and made a good margin. It's a surefire summer margin maker, and that department still does them every summer. Before I move on to reading to you the words of a real fishmonger, a buddy of mine named John, I'll give you 3 pieces of advice about retail seafood cases that I learned from a veteran seafood manager I worked under. Okay, number 1, bring in and showcase whole fish front and center in your seafood display case. Whole fish attract attention. They catch your eye, and this is good. All the little kids in the grocery carts rolling by are gonna notice and gonna beg their parents to linger so they can get a closer look at the whole fish surrounded by crushed ice. This is very good. If people linger at your case, this increases the chance that they're gonna buy something. Okay, number 2. Similar to beef, pork, poultry, and lamb, added value products are the best margin makers. If you're really trying to make money selling fish, get a smokehouse program underway to move fish that isn't selling quick enough. You will not regret it. Number 3, deep clean your fish case every week to keep the fish oil smell at bay. A clean, tidy, odor-free department works subconsciously in your customers' minds and goes a long way to create the appearance of a fresh and attractive product. Take these tips to heart. Plan a summer truck sale. Now here's John Each. My buddy John is my lifelong friend and is one of the guys I lobstered with in the Gulf of Maine. He's been gill netting salmon in Bristol Bay, Alaska for 11 years now, and during the off-season has built out a Midwestern salmon distribution business called Sockeyed Seafood. He's based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Check out his website and follow him on Instagram at Sockeyed Seafood. So here's John Each. I'm going to try to do my best on presenting his writing, though he's a lot funnier than me. He is way funnier than me. So I'll have to record him at some time. I wanted to start selling fish because so many people wanted fish I was bringing back for myself from Alaska. I started bringing back headed and gutted salmon, 4-pound, roughly 4-pound fatties. I gave these as gifts to people, which is kind of ridiculous in hindsight. Not everyone knows how to fillet a fish. I remember there was a girl I was super into, and after my first season in Alaska, she was home, and I went and visited her at her folks' place and brought them a whole salmon wrapped in newspaper. I guarantee that got thrown out. Minnesota's a fishing culture, but not a fat ocean fish culture. Minnesotans know their walleyes and their sunfish and their crappies, but other fish has to be accessible to them for them to try it. A few years after essentially throwing away a whole fish to that girl's family, I brought back a few 100 pounds of fish in the winter and built an igloo in my backyard, complete with thermometer running to the inside. I remember hearing this story from John. That's a result of needing to keep it cold, obviously. So he built this igloo to do that because he didn't have access to a large refrigerated or freezer space. Back to John's writing. I made so many stupid mistakes in those years trying to sell fish, like renting a U-Haul, which is, of course, unrefrigerated, loading it with fish in Seattle at one of the fish companies that we sold to from Alaska, loading it with fish and driving it back to Minnesota as quickly as I could through the night. The fact is that paying to ship fish is actually not that expensive. People everywhere know beef and chicken, and in some family cultures they know lamb and pork, but the accessibility of seafood is relatively new, generationally speaking. My grandparents would have only ever had ocean fish at an expensive restaurant or in fish sticks, for example. I feel like there's that mentality still with seafood about it being a luxury item. I helped open a meat seafood department at a new co-op in Minneapolis, and I was the seafood manager. We had a beautiful open-air fish case and wholesalers that stock all sorts of variety. We sold Atlantic salmon, walleye, and frozen Thai shrimp more than anything else. Some weeks we would carry monkfish, which is a tender, succulent fish that tastes like lobster, and sole, which is a super flaky, tender white fish that is so good. We could only order those in 1-pound orders because they rarely sold. Land mammal meat is a known thing, but seafood has really only recently grown to a national audience. It's a result of huge advancements by fisheries, which is the fishermen, but also the governing bodies that oversee the fisheries and also the marketing associations. They have all made seafood more accessible for everybody with flash freezing and vacuum sealing. I believe the fear of eating cod in Fargo, North Dakota is bullshit, or eating shrimp in Edmonton, Alberta is false, because those are products that are flash frozen after catch and easily shipped to anywhere and thawed out before cooking. No different from the cod we purchase in the finest seafood markets in Chicago, New York, or Austin. That fish, too, is flash frozen after catch. When I started to ramp up my business of bringing salmon back from Alaska to Minnesota, when I started to ramp up this business, I went to a bunch of restaurants and had multiple conversations with chefs and owners of restaurants going something like this. We like your idea, but we only buy fresh salmon, not frozen. To which my reply was, yes, I get it, but this fish I'm trying to sell you has better taste, better color, better nutritional level compared to the farm fish you're buying. We don't buy farm fish, we buy wild caught. You buy wild caught in January? Yes. Really, where are they caught? Alaska. Well, there actually is not a salmon run in Alaska in January, buddy. The last salmon run ended in October, and those are silver salmon. Well, we get them from the Atlantic then. Okay, they actually don't have wild runs of salmon in the Atlantic. They were fished out a long time ago. They reintroduced salmon to the Atlantic, but they're genetically Alaskan salmon, and they are very weak populations, and they are only open to sport fishermen. If you're buying an Atlantic product, it is a farmed product. The conversation would slowly end because they thought I was an asshole. A lot of fishermen have started direct marketing their fish. We have a huge gap in payment for fishermen. Fishermen receive near $1 per pound for the salmon in Bristol Bay, and that is product that goes for $14 a pound outside the Northwest. There's a heavy cost for shipping by the processors that are buying fish, as there are no roads leading into Bristol Bay, so fish have to be shipped out either by boat or plane, and this adds to the heavy costs cutting into the fisherman's cut. So a lot of people have tried to cut out the middlemen and sell to their own personal home communities. Some have been more successful at this than others. In Minnesota, there's around 6 people/companies selling salmon, and 2 others are currently trying to break into the Minneapolis-St. Paul market, which is kind of crazy. People only eat so much salmon, and there's only so many people in this area. It helps that there's a new wave of nutritional eating. Salmon specifically is an incredibly nutrient-rich option. Some folks have used the newer model of community-supported fisheries, CSF, to market their fish, which parallels the model set forth by community-supported agriculture among farmers. This is a model that's used all over the country, especially on the coasts. In conclusion, there's so much about seafood I love. It is a large economy in this country and supports many jobs. In most places, it is a very well-managed industry, especially in Alaska, which only became a state in 1959, so they had many examples of how fisheries across the world had failed. The states that support large fisheries, Alaska, Washington, Oregon, Maine, Massachusetts, Florida, Texas, and CA. I fucking can't remember what does CA stand for. Is that California? Okay, California. Let me try that again. So Alaska, Washington, Oregon, California, Maine, Massachusetts, Florida, Texas need those industries to succeed, for they support so many jobs through the catching of the product, to the processing of the product, to the shipping of the product, and all the businesses and people connect to those things. When I talk to people about farm fish, I usually say this. There's a place for sustainably farmed fish. It's a commodity fish. Think of ground beef. You can buy real cheap ground beef, $3.75 a pound or whatever. But then you know that there's better products for you out there. There's better ground beef for you that's more expensive and absent of things like antibiotics and hormones and is richer in flavor. It's the same with farmed and wild fish. Wild is expensive from a store. and is traditionally eaten for special events, not everyday food. But it's far better than farmed product. I think that's the main point. When given the choice of buying apples, do you care if you're buying an apple from New Zealand over an apple from Minnesota or Washington? I think seafood should also be talked about in regards to supporting our national economy. Thank you, John James Each. We got to get you on a microphone sometime, buddy. At Sockeyed Seafood. He has a great design for his business that you can buy a shirt of too. Buy his shirt, buy his poster, buy some fish from him.
Fishing in the recreational sense is something that I would like to consider myself a master at. Growing up in California, my grandfather would take me freshwater lake fishing almost every single summer for a majority of the summer. We would get up early, turn over flower pots, turn over doormats, and look for worms that were still out from the morning dew. We would put them in a coffee can, and then he would load up this green aluminum boat he had in the bed of his pickup, and we would head down to the local man-made lake, which was Cameron Park, California, just east of El Dorado Hills. Growing up in California, I ignorantly thought that most lakes were man-made until I became old enough and started traveling around America on my own. And it makes sense that there'd be natural lakes everywhere else. But what doesn't make sense is building a thriving city with no natural water source. But you could still fish in the LA River and the aqueduct. My grandfather would teach me how to bait hooks, taught me how to cast from a boat. A two-handed cast will rock the boat. A one-handed cast won't. To recognize the difference when you're on the bottom or when you got a bite. To know when to set the hook. To know when to let the fish swallow it whole. And most importantly, after the day was done, he taught me how to clean up and clean the fish and wash my hands for supper. I did not develop a taste for the fish. I did develop enjoyment of the process. And a majority of my freshwater fishing has been catch and release. Approaching adolescence, me and my friends would meet in the Santa Barbara Harbor almost every night and pull out mackerels and bait fish using Spanish fly jigs. Using the bait fish, we would fish underneath these giant bright lights that shined over the urchin unloading dock for sea bass. We would see them swimming through the school of confused bait fish that were trapped in the harbor. We'd pull out sand sharks, guitar fish, and one time a shopping cart. Every 20 minutes we would have to move because a new urchin ship was coming that needed to unload its catch. As soon as it was done, we would rush back and cast a line into that spotlight shining on the sea of darkness. One night, Chris Valley, Greg Cito, and myself were down there. And a white sea bass that must have been 3 foot long came up and inhaled my bait. My drag was set poorly. It swam away and broke my line like nothing. When me and my friends started getting a little older, our parents started letting us use their boats in the ocean. We were thresher shark fishing off of Carpinteria, fishing right outside a kelp bed from the beach. We hooked one, beat it with thumpers, and cleaned it on the boat. It was a small boat, one that we launched from the beach. As my friends and I were loading up the boat on my friend's truck in the state beach parking lot there in Carpinteria, a warden, accompanied by a police officer, approached us. We showed him all of our proper identification and our fishing licenses and our catch. They thanked us, and then he said, in the future, maybe not do a beach launch, because sunbathers might find it confusing why 3 teens with baseball bats covered in blood are getting out of the surf. I set 3 goals for myself early in life: see the northern lights, ride a bull, and punch a shark in the face in its natural environment. I have done 2 of those. When I came up with these goals, I thought punching the shark would be the easiest one. So I decided that I would get into free diving and spearfishing. I loved being under the water. I loved swimming down 20 feet on a single breath, reaching natural buoyancy, and then sinking like a stone. There's been several times when I've had to cut my weight belt and swim as fast as I could to the surface. The thing I loved about free diving and ocean fishing versus freshwater fishing is there's a limit to what you're going to see fishing a river or fishing in freshwater. When the ocean is all connected to everything, where shadows make themselves clear in about 15 feet of visibility, when you're waiting with anticipation for the Leviathan to reveal itself. Shadows turn into seals, rays, sharks. We would also go spotlighting for bugs at night. Or spinies, which are Pacific Coast lobsters. They're clawless. They're all tail. When the grunting would run in November, me and my friends would go to the beach with a barbecue and eat them as they washed up on shore. Now I live in the Pacific Northwest, some of the best fishing in the entire world. And my days of free diving are behind me. And all I could think about when I was at the aquarium, in the dome room looking at the sturgeon, the salmon, the sand sharks, and when that 6-gilled shark swam by, all I could think is, man, I wish I could punch that shark in the face. But 2 out of 3 on my bucket list ain't bad. This next piece is by David.
Hey gang, David here. If I'm being honest, this week's episode topic totally stumped me. Sure, I've cut fish in restaurants, but whole fish knife work was few and far between because I just never made it a priority to learn the skill, honestly. I don't cut much fish. I really don't. I've always thought if I did pursue it, it'd be, I'd want to learn the Japanese art of cutting fish because it's so precise and you could really work on it forever and kind of nerd out. And really pay respect to somebody else's skill set. I also don't do, much in the way of recreational fishing either. My brother and my dad love it. They're both skilled fishermen. I probably would too if I made time for it. I think I could really go down the fly fishing rabbit hole. But again, there just hasn't been time for a hobby like that for the last 10 years or so. I do, however, know a few people who fish not only for sport, but also to fill their freezer, which I think is great. I was talking to Sarah Longstreth, owner of Goodset Farm today, talking about how this topic's really stumped me. And she said, I think, this is to quote her, she says, I think of fishing as being much more approachable way of harvesting protein. Simply put, a fish is much less complicated in regards to muscle groupings and breaking down. So there's less to navigate when eviscerating, and it's easily caught, handled, and processed by one person without extra and sometimes costly equipment on one's own kitchen countertop. It's also easy to store afterwards, i.e. doesn't take up a lot of space. And if you do happen to screw something up, the damage seems much less costly, therefore making it a bit less intimidating for those of us that aren't skilled butchers. And I totally appreciate that, actually. I agree. I think it's a really sustainable and easy and fun way to fill your freezer. I mean, her dad, Brian, is a really skilled fisherman and has given us some great, it's awesome to open up the freezer and have some steelhead in there to take out and enjoy, I guess I can really see that point of view. And I think the utilitarian in me, could really get motivated to go more often if I thought about it this way. But what about cutting the fish? Maybe I could really nerd out on catching them, but I still have to handle them when I get home, and I could get make my way through it, but I just don't have that basic knowledge of how to find my way around a new fish. So I've got this book that I bought a while ago, and I've checked a few things out in it for inspiration occasionally. I've always skipped this particular chapter regarding fish. It's called A Guide to Canning, Freezing, Curing, and Smoking Meat, Fish, and Game by Wilbur F. Eastman Jr. And it's cool. It's like kind of a classic. It's pretty basic, but has some cool stuff in it regarding game and canning, preserving, some actual numbers in there, a lot of recipes, dealing with canning meat, canning fish, canning shellfish, curing fish. I recommend picking it up. It's super cheap on, I don't know, I think I got it off of eBay or something. But I thought maybe, I would read this chapter on handling fish for like the first time ever right now, because it's what I would do if I was going to go fishing. So Wilbur Eastman says that fish is a very versatile food. Comes from fresh water and from salt water. We have fin fish as well as shellfish. And fish, depending on what kinds, may be canned, frozen, cured, or smoked. It's sometimes dried and sometimes pickled. It's much sought after and is high in nutritive value. But fish is extremely fragile in terms of storage. It spoils in short order if not consumed promptly or processed quickly for later use. Freshly caught fish has been known to spoil in the boat or in the angler's basket even before he or she could get home. It's most important, then, that it be chilled between 32 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 and 4.5 degrees Celsius for you barbarians. As soon as caught and kept cold at that temperature, right up to the time it is cooked or processed. That's why the careful angler will provide a means to pack the catch in ice as soon as it's caught. And the catch must be eviscerated and bled thoroughly as soon as it's caught. Digestive enzymes found in the gut will spoil the fish rapidly and give off flavors that will put you off. As advised earlier in the book, process only top quality fish. Don't be cutting fish with goiters or like lampreys sucking on them or anything. And what are the earmarks of good quality fish? Look for eyes that are bright and clear, flesh that is firm to the touch, and gills pink to red in color. And be certain that no unpleasant odors emanate from it. Diseased fish may have sunken eyes, discolored skin, loose scales, white, bloody, or slimy gills. Shellfish should be kept alive until cooked or processed. I don't know if you've ever worked in a restaurant where they've been serving dead mussels, but god damn it, does that stink. And to reduce your risk of exposure to disease, wear disposable plastic gloves while handling finfish or shellfish, or, just wash your hands. Wilbur then describes how to prepare fish for processing. We've not yet discussed the matter of slaughtering and eviscerating animals other than wild game in this book. We have, instead, assumed that animals have already been properly slaughtered and cleaned either on the farm or in a commercial slaughterhouse. Since, like game, fish is so perishable, it usually befalls the angler to clean a catch as soon as it's caught, entrails must be removed a maximum of 2 hours after a catch. For this reason, we shall give below steps for cleaning, preparing, and processing. For fin fish, using a clean fillet knife, which is kind of a long, skinny, bony knife, bleed the fish by cutting the throat and then remove the gills and the entrails. Scrape off the scales, insert the knife at the vent, which is the butthole, and slit up to the head. Remove the entrails, cut off the head, fins, and tail. Cut the fillet from the head to the tail, and cut along the backbone from the tail to head to remove the fillet. I've done that. I've seen that done before. He suggests to use clean water, pre-moistened wipes, or alcohol swabs to clean your knife. That's not so different from butchery. I mean, we have like a dip or sanitizer dip, hot dip. You want to wipe the fish surface clean with cloth or paper towels. Place dirty towels in plastic resealable bags on ice until you can safely dispose of them or wash them. That's a pretty good idea to keep like an ice cooler for your dirty, nasty towels while fishing. If you're making fillets, rinse the fish in the clean cold water to remove blood, bacteria, and digestive enzymes. To prevent bacterial growth, quickly cool fish to 32 to 40 degrees. Save the roe for freezing if you find a belly full of roe. And you can dress larger fish by cutting crosswise into steaks, which I've never done before. This all sounds pretty intuitive. Nothing here is really blowing my mind. But I know that there's a lot of different like on a tuna, they take like the 4 large loins off of it. And I was on YouTube and was trying to watch some fish butchers, and it seems really similar to me. You've got it's very methodical. They do one thing at a time, and seems like everybody, just like any other good butcher in a processing plant, has got like a method that they never deviate from. Or fishmongers or fish cutters, butchers. I don't know. I think that, I guess I just don't know. I think a butcher that had fish cutting experience would have better knife skills than your average, backyard butcher or something. Something I'd like to do someday to maybe have a more steady hand. But I don't know. I think there are fishmongers that are butchers, but I don't think that there's many butchers that are fishmongers, if that makes sense. That's just my opinion, though. Probably because I don't have much experience with cutting fish. Wilbur does have one more thing that I think is kind of cool. I've smoked fish, I think, with family members a long time ago, and we didn't do this process. This is the dry curing process to get it ready to smoke. So this is super simple, and for those of us that have never smoked any fish or tried it, or don't do much fishing but are thinking about it this year, and are a novice like me, I think this is a pretty cool process. So he says, clean and dress the fish so the collarbone remains, since it holds the flesh together and provides a way to hang the fish during drying. When cleaned, fish are usually cut into fillets or cut along the backbone from inside and spread open. Wash them well in a mild solution of 1 cup of salt to 1 gallon of pure cold water. Inspect the fish to be sure all foreign matter is removed and blood no longer appears anywhere. Then drain for 15 minutes. Coat all surfaces of each fish with pure pickling salt, using 1 pound of salt for 2 pounds of fish. If you have a box or some other food-grade container with holes in the bottom to allow drainage, use that, piling the fish flesh side up in the stacks. The top piece is laid flesh side down. Do not make stacks more than 12 layers deep. When stacking fish, be sure to sprinkle salt generously between the layers, as well as under the bottom layer and on top of the top layer. Usually you should figure about 1 pound of salt for each 4 pounds of fish. Refrigerate the boxes for approximately 2 weeks. A precise time cannot be given because you'll have to consider the size and thickness of the fish, and experimentation is about the only way to find out. Brine made by the salt and fish juices will drain out. It helps to move the pile of fish each night, kind of pressing down to release the brine. Next, after the time is up, remove the fish from the salt, scrub it with the potable water to remove all residue of salt, and dry it on racks in a cool, 50 to 76 degrees Fahrenheit. Dry place with good circulation. A common type of rack is made from like wire cloth or something stretched over a wooden frame, kind of like a screen. Lay the fish out, skin side down, and turn it frequently to make sure it's drying thoroughly and evenly. Drying should take 1 to 2 hours. The fish is now ready to smoke, which is recommended after curing to control bacterial growth and assure safety. I think this is something I'll probably try this summer. I just got a new grill and it has smoke capabilities, and so it sounds easy enough to me. If anybody else has any sort of pickling or curing or just fish preservation methods whatsoever, I sure would like to hear them. That stuff's sort of right up my alley. Take some time to share those preservation techniques on the Facebook group or send them to the Meat Block Instagram. We'll look forward to seeing them.
Ow! I'm ready! Coming up tonight, shining through the tree.
All right, that's going to do it for this episode of the Meat Block Podcast. I just want to say that I like sharks. They're important to the ecosystem. That a lot of what I say is dry to the point where you need a glass of water to take it. Ocean conservation is very important. David Attenborough is one of my biggest heroes in this sense. And I encourage everyone to watch Blue Planet 2. It just came out. And they're not sponsoring this show. It's just beautiful visually. And if you have ideas or corrections or suggestions for this show and future shows, please contact us. themeatblockpodcast@gmail.com. Tweet us at themeatblockpod, even though no one does. I'd actually be surprised if someone tweeted us. So, surprise me. Or hit us up on Instagram at The Meat Block, or head over to the Facebook group, The Meat Block. The community is growing. And it is truly a place for people with open hearts and open minds. And if you want to get a hold of Ryan, he is at Gather and Break on Instagram. David is at A Farm Butcher on Instagram. And I am at American Butcher on Instagram and Facebook. And if you want to support the show, the best way to do that right now is open up the Apple Podcast app, type in The Meat Block, leave a comment, and leave a 5-star review. That would be awesome. Just like Matt Lever, who left such a wonderful comment. Thank you so much, Matt. Or tag us on social media at The Meat Block and use the hashtag The Meat Block, just like Chef Brian Young. There's been a lot of talk online about how to get us to the WBC. And I want to say thank you for everyone for having that conversation. It's honored that people would suggest that they would offer donations. It truly means a lot to me and Ryan and David, I'm sure. We came up with a solution to cover the event, and I'll have more on that in future episodes, as well with another interview with Rob Slater about the upcoming event. So remember, keep your knife sharp and live in the margin.